Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm very excited and happy to see everybody here and to welcome Benjamin Hary, who is the site director of NYU Tel Aviv and a professor at the Skirball Department of Hebrew and Judaic Studies. Up until 2014, he was professor of Hebrew, Arabic, and linguistics and the director of the program in linguistics at Emory University. He is the author of Multiglossia in Judeo-Arabic, Translating Religion and Daily Life in Israel. He is also the editor and co-editor of Judaism and Islam, Corpus Linguistics and Modern Hebrew, and Esoteric Aspects in Judeo-Arabic Culture. Hary has published over 50 articles and book reviews on Judeo-Arabic, as well as Arabic and Hebrew linguistics, and has lectured widely in Europe, Israel, Egypt, and North America. He is currently working on completing his book, Sacred Texts in Egyptian Judeo-Arabic, and editing a volume on Jewish languages. We are so happy to have Benny here, as well as the extraordinary faculty of NYU Tel Aviv. So Benny, I'll have you take it away.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Marianne, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, the people in Global, Janet, Marianne, Jonathan, and of course, Jing and Kimi for organizing this wonderful journey together to Tel Aviv. I also want to thank Idan Raviv, the Assistant Director for Academics, who helped a lot in organizing our side. So, welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, wherever you are, wherever in the world you may be in. I'm Benjamin Hary, NYU Tel Aviv Site Director and Skirball Professor of Jewish and Middle Eastern Studies. Israel is a home to both amazing human achievements and very complex social tensions, all within a geographical area about the size of Rhode Island. Alongside increasing normalization with its Arab neighbors, including recently the UAE, Israel's problematic situation with the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank remains. Home to perhaps the highest number of religious sites in the world, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Baha'i, Israeli society is reaching a boiling point in the tension between religion and modernity. While in some ways a largely homogeneous nation, 80% identifies Jewish, the country presents conflicts along many types of identity, religious, ethnic, ideological, economical, and more. But it is precisely these conflicts, contradictions, and tensions, some of which are thousands of years old, as we'll hear very soon, that not only make Israel the unique microcosmos that it is to study, but have also led to amazing human achievements in science, culture, literature, technology, and much more. Dr. Barak Ben-Avinoam here is a serial entrepreneur and a global expert in the field of early stage investments and technology startups. Barak teaches innovation and entrepreneurship at NYU Tel Aviv. Dr. Yifat Thareani, who has two computers in front of her, is the director of NYU Tel Aviv's Archaeology program, the Caesarea Maritima project at NYU Tel Aviv, and a research archaeologist at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem. So welcome both. I'm so happy to see you here. So let's explore a few things here together. Let's first explore how ancient is ancient. So I'm going to ask Yifat, how far back has this land been settled, and what makes it unique in the scope of ancient history? Yifat, please.
Well, thank you, Benny. Shalom from Jerusalem. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So hi, everybody. Well, truth is that human culture that has developed in this area is of the ancient most in the world. The first human beings who departed from Africa and marched in their wanderings passed by this small piece of land and even settled here, even decided to settle here. One of the most earliest sites in the world outside Africa is located here in the Jordan Valley. Its name is Obadiah, and it dates back to 1.2 million years before present. In the archaeological excavations that were conducted in this site, archaeologists uncovered the remains of human beings, so human beings, as well as animal bones and stone vessels. In the past, some of the religious people who acted in the archaeology of the Holy Land believed that this is the biblical heaven, no less. Ever since the Stone Age, the land of Israel collected several evidence for human culture, starting from the society of the hunter-gatherer of the early Stone Age, through the first agricultural villages of the Neolithic period, and the first cities in the early Bronze Age, to the mighty fortification city-states of the Middle Bronze Age. It seems that for eternity, this area was settled by human beings, and that for some reason, for many reasons actually, people found it attractive to settle. Benny?
Thanks. That's really important to explore, and we will explore more of it. So let's now move and ask the question of Barak: how modern is modern? That is, can you please describe the size of Israel's startup scene, and what are some of Israel's craziest new inventions?
Sure. So first, thank you for inviting me over. And maybe before I provide some details, let me just say that in addition to teaching entrepreneurship at the NYU Tel Aviv Center, I'm also a full-time venture capitalist that is working with entrepreneurs and investors worldwide. And I'm part of a venture capital fund out of Palo Alto, California, and working or responsible for the investments in Israel. So what I'm about to share with you is really a kind of a global perspective, how Israel is measured with the Silicon Valley and other leading locations in the world. So first of all, we just last year, the recent statistics about funding coming into Israel to fund new entrepreneurship was $10 billion. 10 billion on a per capita basis. This is the highest funded places in the world, and on average numbers, this is second only to California. Really, it's higher than most nations in Europe and definitely in Southeast Asia. In terms of number of deals announced on a daily basis, we have 2 or 3 deals every day announced. And just to put things in perspective, we're talking about a population of 9 million people total. Less than 10% are in high tech. So we're talking about, 800,000 people at most that are starting new companies almost on a daily or bi-weekly basis. So really what we see here, in addition to the high concentration of capital and human capital, we see crazy ideas, as Benny mentioned it. Some of them are drone-based everything, starting from security, agriculture, and backyard delivery of food and groceries. AI, artificial intelligence-based everything, starting from autonomous driving, shared transportation, medical application, radiology, and any other thing you could think of that is based on artificial intelligence. And I would say lastly, many paradigm breaker startups in every field possible, like fintech, insurtech, sports tech, food tech. If you would come to our classes, I'd be able, would be happy to get you to meet some of the world's leading entrepreneurs in those areas. Benny.
Thank you. That's really exciting. So maybe before we continue to our second part, maybe I can ask Yifat if you can think of some examples of innovation or entrepreneurship in the old world, in the ancient world.
Well,
Maybe
you know,
this
sorry,
way.
go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for asking that. And the answer is, of course, yes. We know that the need is the father of all inventions, and ancient societies needed a lot of things. So it seems that ever since the inception of the human culture, the land of the promised land, or the Holy Land, as we often call it, used as a land bridge between Africa on one hand and Asia on the other hand, between the desert and the Mediterranean, between Egypt and Mesopotamia. It started in the prehistorical era, as we said, but it's go and being intensified as time passed towards the periods of the Bronze and the Iron Age. The advent of the greatest empires on the historical arena and the strategic location of the land dictated its importance to the great power and to the cultural imprints that they left on it. All the great powers left their mark on this land, and perhaps this is also the place where the alphabet was invented. And in my opinion, the invention of the alphabet is the most democratic invention in the history of human being, because it enables us all to write and read and understand and express things. This is also the place where, from a small, tiny, mountainous kingdom, which is capital is Jerusalem, appeared the most original creation of the Bible. Conflict appears in the place where human beings are, and there have always been conflicts along new inventions. Conflicts became more and more interesting from the time we were able to witness and experience them in the archaeological record, which means with the invention of the first villages, the first agricultural villages, the first cities and the city-states, the kingdoms, and the first struggle over power, natural resources, and rule. There is a good reason for that, the most adorned armies of the ancient Near East, the Egyptian armies of Thutmose III and Ramses II, march here on their way from Egypt to the north. The armies, the troops of Assyria and Babylon, conquered and destroyed the cities of the Holy Land and left their mark on the archaeological record and on the biblical evidence. Some of the greatest conquests that the ancient Near East knew took place in this small piece of land and were commemorated in the inscriptions of the royal inscriptions and in reliefs. And there were also conflicts that were sparked by what I call the silent majority, the common people that settled the land, semi-nomads in front of settlers, Israelites in front of Philistines, poor and rich and more. We archaeologists are very fond of destructions and fire and conquest because they are freezing the moment and they enrich our museum collections. But we have to remember that most of the people in antiquity lived their life quite peacefully. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks. This is wonderful, Yifat. Thank you so much. So we want now to get into another part of the conversation where we would like to explore the meeting point of the ancient and the modern. So let me start with Barak this time. It is clear that Israel is at the cutting edge of science and technology, but what are the cultural and historical sources of this type of innovation, of this innovation? How did it start? How did it happen? Why did it happen here? What's going on here?
So first, let me make a personal confession. I'm not an archaeologist, but my name is a biblical name. This is, my father named me after a biblical figure. And as a child, on weekend trips, we would see many of the things that Yifat was just mentioning. And those are the kind of things that we see here, wherever you go on a weekend stroll. So many of those things, I think, are instilled in the DNA. up to these days. And when I was kind of preparing my thoughts regarding your question, I think that um, this is something that has been passed on from generation to generation. And for us Israelis, maybe this is trivial, but let me just kind of repeat some of the facts for those of us on the audience who are not familiar with the details. So Israel is really a young country. I mean, the nation, Israel right now, is about 72 years old. So the vast majority of the population comes from a countless immigrant backgrounds. And the first thing that happens when you're an immigrant and you come to a new land that has no water, no food supply, you don't speak the language, you really need to make do with your own intellect. So many of the things that we now consider to be the products of the startup nation actually came out as answer to necessity, to really survival necessity. So in Israel, we have great innovation in terms of food technology, protein replacements or alternatives, irrigation. How do you conduct agriculture in a desert land? Um, how do you drink seawater? Because basically this is a desert with no water, and we're surrounded by nations that have no water. And in fact, Israel by now in 2019, 2020 has more water that we actually need because the desalination plants that are using seawater, and we're giving those water to our neighbors. So this, I would say, would be the first thing. The second thing is, and again, Yifat mentioned briefly the conflict that have been in this area, I don't know, for the last 5,000 years. Um, so since the state of Israel was born, it has always been in some sort of a military conflict, which actually caused two things. Number one, mandatory military service that builds character for our younger men and younger women. And it doesn't really matter if they serve in a combat unit or a technology unit, but compared to other peers worldwide, it is not uncommon to have a 20-year-old young man or young woman in Israel managing or commanding a team of people or equipment worth of millions of dollars. So sense of responsibility, sense of empowerment is something that we see in our younger generation. The second thing, the military service also puts or provides um, unparalleled investment in state-of-the-art technology for military use. But that military know-how is then being um put to good use in the civilian life once those people are getting discharged from the military. So many of the applications we use today in our day-to-day lives, be it in the well-being in medical device or cybersecurity, that we take for granted these days, actually started from military service. And maybe the last point I want to mention has a lot to do with the cultural background. So those of us who have studied some of Gerrit Hofstede's studies about the different dimensions of cultures, Israel is very, very high on, uh, or actually very low on power distance. So power distance is how do we look up, or whether we look up to power figures, our teachers, our professors, our political figures, that, or we constantly challenge them. And in Israel, we are notorious for challenging the status quo, always the younger people trying to come up with a new and better way of doing things. And I think this is something that is kind of instilled in the DNA up to these days.
Yeah, thanks, Barak. And I think if I may add, you talked about the contribution of the military to the high-tech scene. It's important to know that the military is really, it sounds very militaristic, but the military is really part of this nation. Like almost everyone goes to serve in the army, so the military is a preparation field, not just for the high tech, but for anything else. So
definitely builds character.
And the best Israeli singers and artists and theater players started their career in the military because there is a military singing groups, there's military theater, etc., etc. So if you really want to be a radio announcer or TV presenter, you really should go to the Israeli radio station and be there during the military, and then you could graduate into the real the real scene. So so the military is a good place where many things in the civil society will later begin. I think that's an important point that you raised, and it's true for all other parts, sports, for example, and all other parts of the civil society. Let me move to Yifat and ask you, Yifat, earlier we discussed how old this place really is. Can you think of any themes or aspects of antiquity that appear in Israeli culture and society today?
Well, yes, of course. I think that there is no doubt that this is the constant dance between the bestseller of all times, the Bible, and archaeology is what makes this how to say conversation still alive and vivid in the mind and imagination of many Israelis, but not only Israelis, also people all across the world, people who believe and who don't believe. And even thousands of years after the Bible was written, questions like who wrote the Bible, and did Joshua really conquer Jericho, and were David and Solomon were actual historical figures that acted in Jerusalem? Was Jerusalem the capital of an empire, of a glorious empire as the Bible depicts? How the daily life of ancient Israelite society looked like when God was born, and did he have a wife? Questions like these can be asked only here, and only through a real, exploration with the various layers and voices that this place offer. And they are really relevant to modern Israel today, as Barak previously correctly pointed out, and also for the general Judeo-Christian world, I think. While the first archaeologists, both Europeans, Americans, and Israelis, were either religious or secular fundamentalists aiming at proving the legitimation of the newly born Israeli state over the land, these people wanted to prove the authenticity of the biblical stories by archaeological means. Today, after 170 years of intensive archaeological exploration, archaeology is standing as a science by itself. And we should all bear in mind that archaeology is a one-time destructive, subversive science, digging deep into the very essence of the human experience. And as such, it is the responsibility of us archaeologists to move this legacy. You can see behind the vessels from our excavations at Tel Dan, that we are currently preparing for final publication, hopefully next year. So kicking and alive Tel Dan after 3,000 years of settlement. And archaeology is also, since this is a huge task to for example, to publish a site that you did, you have to collaborate, lots of investigators, lots of scientists. So we have architects, we have historians, we have biblical scholars, we have art historians, we have archaeologists, archaeobotanic, chemical people, chemists to conduct our carbon 14 exams, biologists, linguistic, and so on and so forth. But there are also conflicts. Whose past is this, and to who this place belongs? Today we are challenged by other narratives, other national narratives. For example, the Palestinian narrative, which is as legitimate as at least in my opinion, as legitimate as the Israeli voice. And we have to cope with that, and we have to find ways to integrate our past into these interpretations and opinions, how modern borders and boundaries shape our political observation and dictate our perception, our world perception, not only for the present, but also for the past. I remember that when I was young, I just graduated my PhD at Tel Aviv University, and I got Tel Dan, and I had to go to a postdoc. I decided to go to Paris. Why is that? Because I thought that French missions that dig in Syria and Iraq can teach me more about my site than staying here in Israel and learning once more from Jerusalem to the north. I rather go to Paris, sit with people who dig in Syria, and see how Tel Dan looks from the side of the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. So it was there in Paris where I realized how much the modern borders, the border, Dan sits exactly on the border between Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. And it was in Paris that I realized how much the border limits my view of the past. And today I'm capable to point out, for example, on this vessel and say, oh, there is a good parallel in Syria, and there were contacts between Syrians and Israelis already in the Iron Age too. So this is how things like archaeology and history are becoming relevant. Do I have one more minute to say something? Okay, I have a lot to say, as you can see. The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau testified on the historian that he is a person who decided to deal with the past in order to cover his detest from the present. Now, without saying anything about Israeli politics in present or what's going on in present, I think that archaeology enables us all to view from the distance of place and time and to touch some sensitive, hot issues. The reliability of the biblical story, migration, gender, refugee studies, resistance, identity, ethnicity, style. And from exploring this aspect in the past, we can take something for ourselves and to learn something about our present. At the end of the day, we are becoming more aware and more sensitive to our environment, to our community, to our legacy, and we have the ability to evaluate processes and events in what the late Fernand Braudel called the longue durée. Thank you.
Thank you, Yifat. We are approaching the end of our talk, and we would like to move as a summary to look at the ancient and the modern at NYU Tel Aviv, not just in Israel, but at NYU Tel Aviv itself. And we want to talk about our offering. You saw some of the slides that Janet was playing before, but we want to talk about our offerings and how they are integrated into the ancient and the modern. But I'll start with Barak. What is your approach to teaching the modern, and how do you compare the NYU Tel Aviv learning experience to other programs where you have taught or teach regularly?
Right. So first, I should give full disclosure that I teach the same course in other universities in the world. But the benefit or advantage of having when I teach it in Israel is that it is very much a hands-on practical experience as opposed to a theoretical experience when I teach the same seminar when I'm in China or in France. So pretty much what we do, we are simulating starting an enterprise, the students together with me and with some role models from the local Israeli ecosystem would go through the steps of coming up with a good idea or several ideas, then validating those ideas, creating a business model for them, validating the business model by actually getting out of the building. This is a crucial step in the methodology of getting out of the building and talking to potential customers and partners and investors. And as we already mentioned, we have a whole lot of those in Israel, in Tel Aviv. So within a walking distance or a bicycle ride distance from our campus in Tel Aviv, students would actually be able to see firsthand and experience firsthand by visiting to local startup companies, talking to local entrepreneurs. Join me to entrepreneurship trade shows where from past years you may able to pick up some pictures from previous class trips to a local trade show where the students for one day become investors like I am on my day job, and they look for really good companies to invest in, and they wear a hat of the investor. And really this reversal of roles of one day becoming an investor makes you understand what it makes or what it takes to become a good entrepreneur. And lastly, I would say one other thing that we have unfair advantage in Tel Aviv, we have tons of young people, Israelis and non-Israelis who live in Tel Aviv, who are not that much older than our students and could actually come in and share their own life stories. So these are not necessarily multi-million-dollar entrepreneurs or investors. These are guys just like you. A couple of years back, they were my students and maybe took an internship in one of the startup companies in Tel Aviv. And upon graduation, joined those companies full time. And they share their journey in the Israeli innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I can tell you, judging by witnessing those kind of meetings, those are probably the most exciting times in my classes for the students.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I'll let Yifat talk about her approach to teaching the ancient. How do you compare NYU Tel Aviv learning experience to other programs? And after Yifat, I'll summarize our programs and talk to you about our special internship possibilities and scholarship and grants possibilities. So please, Yifat.
Well, honestly, this is, I think, the 6 or 7 years that I teach at NYU Tel Aviv, and I feel both blessed and privileged because Israeli archaeology is quite a traditional, segregated discipline. And as such, it also dictates quite traditional themes. Teaching at NYU Tel Aviv enabled me to bring my own voice and my own perception of the past, and to let the word spread. As a child from an Irano-Jewish family who grew up in the streets of what is called here the Black City of South Tel Aviv, I truly believe that archaeology is a democratic science that enables each scientist, each archaeologist to express the voice of what I call the silent majority. Unlike history that is being written by the victorious one, as Sir Churchill once said, archaeology calls for a more pluralistic, multivocal, multicultural point of view, and allows us to experience the very essence of ethnicity, style, ancient cognition. And so I hope that I am enabling my students to open a window to an ancient world where there are, on one side, yes, there are emperors and kings and queens, palaces and temples, but on the other side, there are also slaves and refugees, immigrants, minorities, women, children, elders, crowded streets and crowded neighborhoods. This allows me to offer a more balanced view of the past, to make justice in a way, and to make the voice of a rich, varied, plural, multicultural past far beyond what the Bible and the historical sources offer. In light of this, I think that archaeology and exploration of the past of this land are relevant to every student. And we had here students from psychiatric to architecture to art and the entire scope. Each student is more than welcome to bring his own story, his own biography, and his own association and questions to our archaeology, and to contribute to the archaeological story and to be enriched by it. Thank you.
Thanks. So, in sum, we do have the ancient and the modern at NYU Tel Aviv, and I'll give you a few examples. We have two wonderful scholarships which students can apply. One in the modern, if you take the innovation course that Barak teaches at NYU Tel Aviv, and you declare a minor in Jewish studies, which is very, very easy to complete even for NYU Shanghai students. And if you had done that in the past, you are entitled to receive a $5,000 grant. So this is a nice way of using a grant to study here. On the other hand, we also have a very nice grant for archaeology. We still have a few grants available that we hope to give them in the fall and or in the spring next year. Of course, we need in-person participation, and the world is still an unknown place. Although I must say that in Israel, the vaccination program is quite amazing. I don't know if you know, but close to 70 or over 60% of the population had been vaccinated already. And on Sunday, we are going almost back to normal. A bit scared about it, but things are going back to almost normal here on Sunday. Of course, in China, things are, I guess, normal by now. So it's not so revolutionary for you people in China. So we do have the innovation and the archaeology programs along with grants. We have science here and politics. So science would do more the modern, politics does both. A nice thing that we can boast is, of course, the internship program. And we have a wonderful internship coordinator, and she's able to place, I think, over 95% of our applications, if not higher, to a very meaningful internships around the Tel Aviv area. And some students have even traveled to other places in Israel to do the internship. This can be anything in high tech or in biology or in NGO, social responsibility, workers' rights, Palestinian rights, etc., etc. We boast some very interesting co-curricular trips to ancient sites and to modern high-tech companies. So again, we do both. Of course, Jerusalem is a nice part of our program. We go there a few times during the semester, and we have wonderful Yifat to guide us there. So this is basically the stuff, the modern and the ancient that we do here. So please submit the questions via the Q&A, I suppose, right, Janet? And I think I have a question here. Maybe Marianne, you want to express the question? You're still on mute.
Sure, yes, sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you. I mean, this was just a fantastic presentation and really wonderful in terms of understanding the unique characteristics, both historically and currently and culturally, that make Israel such an extraordinary location for innovation. Barak, you used a term, and this is a term that I hear often describing Tel Aviv as an ecosystem. So I'm wondering what that means in practicality in terms of how does that manifest in terms of development, in terms of production? What does that mean exactly?
Right. So first of all, the term ecosystem in the context of the Israeli innovation world means that pretty much everything that is necessary in order to complete successfully a product development, starting by academic programs that have excellent graduates, moving on to fundraising that is within literally walking distance or bicycle ride away. Service providers, starting with accounting, lawyers, patent attorneys, etc. Everything is in a relatively short distance, and being such an informal country, uh, I guess nobody's more than one phone call away. And I keep getting phone calls from people that I've never met before, introducing themselves to me and say, well, we know that you're an investor. We have a question. Could we consult with you, or could we pitch our company to you? So I think that a close proximity and the informality of the people makes it a unique experience. And this is one of the secret sauces of the Israeli ecosystem. And I think this is really an exciting place for somebody who's not part of the Israeli ecosystem, who comes here for a visit. Everybody's very open up their doors of their startup company, the VCs. I've brought my students to all kind of fun locations. I know we mentioned Idan Raviv, the assistant director of the center. So he took our students to a site visit of an exciting startup company, and students were just ecstatic about it. So I think that the fact that we have everything nearby, I would say walking or bicycle ride away from our campus, is really our secret sauce.
Thank you, Barak. Are there any question? I guess, Janet, you have a good question, so please.
Sure. I'm just wondering, we've been speaking about the ancient and the modern, and there are things to learn from each. Given the pandemic and how Israel's handled the pandemic, are there lessons learned for other countries from both the ancient and modern perspectives in Israel on moving forward after the pandemic?
Maybe Yifat is talking a lot about pandemics in the ancient world. As a matter of fact, she has lectured about it, and we are going to do it soon again. So maybe you can say a few words, and then maybe I can add something to it.
Well, the truth is that Yifat was forced to deal with the issue of pandemic in the ancient world because, we were in the middle of the semester and we had students here, and it just called for it. We had to do something about it. And actually it was very interesting to explore this a bit and see how, it's strange, but the truth is that human reaction to this kind of events, which are catastrophic events, remain quite the same. We read a Hellenistic account of a historiographer who described the plague in Athens. And it was in the first millennium BCE, and the sentiments that he expressed and the way that people felt, both from the social and from in the individual aspect, are the same. And I think that in a way it helps to know that this situation, this COVID situation, is so bizarre and so not. We haven't seen anything like that before. And knowing that ancient societies coped with the same conditions, even more horrifying, because they didn't have the vaccine. They just needed this wave to disappear. And I think we found a bit. I remember Benny's face during the lecture, and I think we found a bit comfort knowing that this is the faith of human societies in general, and that this postmodern adventure of COVID is not it's not only for us, the fear of plague, being this connected from your loved ones, being unable to interact socially and in person. This is and the idea that you are in a constant fear from the unknown, from the hostile. This is something that human societies share, no matter what technological means they had at their disposal. And so we did some kind of I mentioned the langue durée before, so we did a langue durée survey of ancient pandemics, and it was very interesting. If I may add something here, and this is something that I was happy to discover, I had the pleasure to organize a huge conference together with the Skirball department and Professor Larry Schiffman at New York of ancient archaeology and history, where we had between 500 and 750 attendees every session. And this is something that we didn't even know that we are capable of, you know, organizing a conference with hundreds of participants in relatively short time, and with 45 or 50 archaeologists from all over the world participating, sharing their research and field of interest. And I know from colleagues that this was an entirely good, let's say, positive, contributing experience. This is something that I learned from COVID as well. So
thank you. And maybe to complement and answer Janet, so there have been, dealing with COVID here, there had been many successes and many failures. So some things we were not able to do because the nature of this society, we were not able to close the airport. You know, it's a small country, it's 9-10 million people and kind of an island because we don't have many open borders to our neighbors. It's very easy to control, almost like New Zealand in some ways. But we didn't use this advantage, and there were two, and now I'm very worried because they're reopening, and who knows what will happen with the variants, and if it will wipe out all our achievements in the vaccination program. So that's something that I'm worried. China was able to control it much better, and the flow of people is very limited. So did Australia. Israel didn't, and I don't think we can in the future. On the other hand, the vaccination program is so successful because of the nature of this society. And why is that? Because of the family-oriented, which we have also in China, family-oriented nature of the society, and the establishment of social medicine, which is so strong here, with the digitalization. Everything is online. So it was so easy to get everyone vaccinated in a very fast way. Like in one day after the vaccines had arrived, 3 days after it had arrived, I already went to Haifa, to this soccer stadium, and people were vaccinated one after the other without waiting in line. I was in my car, came there, a very sweet Arab lady, nurse, came to me. I spoke to her in Arabic. She was very excited. And I said, thank you for your service. Boom, off the next one. You know, so the vaccination program was really quite amazing, with the achievement of the high tech and the digital and that Israel had in the medical service. So I guess we are coming to the end of the program. I want to plug here, on Thursday, we have a wonderful program, again, new diplomacy in the era of digitalization. So I invite you all. It's going to be 7:30 our time, 12:30 New York time. If you are interested in more details, you can email me. It's easy to find me online. And Ido Aharoni, an NYU professor and previous Israeli ambassador, will talk about the shift from G to G, government to government, policy-making model, to a more P2P, people to people, because of the social media, because of the digital world, and how it's changed in the diplomatic world. So I invite you all to come here. And again, I want to end telling you that life is quite amazing here in Tel Aviv. The weather is fantastic. The food is incredible. And now the restaurants are open on Sunday, next Sunday. the sea is, of course, beautiful and walkable from every part of the city. The city is relatively small and very much walkable. And people are very warm here. And sometimes you'll be amazed how people approach you on the street and quite friendly and would ask you questions about yourself in maybe inquisitive way, but non-threatening, you know. So it takes time to learn the system. But I want to thank again our friends in Global, Janet and Marion and Chris and Jonathan, whoever helped organize these wonderful journeys, our friends at NYU Shanghai, Jing, Kimi. I think John might be online, so I want to welcome you and thank you. And of course, I want to thank my staff, especially Idan Raviv and Eran Rotchenker, our student manager of Student Life, for helping organize this. And email us if you need anything, or email Global. And thank you so much for joining us, as Janet says.
Great, and thank you, Benny and Yifat, and all of you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Thanks to everybody for attending, and we're running the slides. So sit back, enjoy, gather information. Please don't hesitate to reach out and email us. Thank you.
Bye. You all.